The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the basketball court, the squeak of sneakers a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant hum of traffic. I watched from beneath the shade of a sprawling oak, pretending to read, my gaze fixed on the unfolding scene. Yen Zioin, a wisp of a girl in a simple white dress, stood awkwardly by a table laden with plastic water bottles. A small, hand-painted sign proclaimed a meager price, a price I knew most students wouldn't hesitate to pay, especially on a day as sweltering as this. But they weren't buying water. They were buying a chance to linger, to exchange a few words, to bask in the reflected glory of Shenho, who stood a few feet away, effortlessly charming, the center of a small, admiring crowd. My chest tightened. This carefully orchestrated display of feminine diligence, this thinly veiled excuse to be near him, was both irritating and admirable. Yen Zioin's strategy, though transparent, was effective. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense, her features too sharp, her expression too guarded. But there was an intensity in her gaze, a quiet intelligence that set her apart. I knew, with a certainty that bordered on premonition, that she was a force to be reckoned with. "Who's that girl?" Chunkian's voice startled me. I hadn't realized she'd joined me. "Yen Zioin," I murmured, my eyes still fixed on Shenho. He was laughing now, his head thrown back, the sunlight catching the sharp angles of his jaw. My stomach twisted with a familiar ache. The one selling water. Why is she doing that? Chunkian's tone was laced with curiosity, tinged with the faintest hint of disdain. The disdain, I knew, wasn't directed at Yen Zioin but at her obvious pursuit of Shenho. Chunkian, bless her oblivious heart, still harbored the illusion that she stood a chance. "Who knows," I replied, feigning indifference. Inside, a plan was beginning to form. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on my lips. A few minutes later, I strolled over to Yen Zioin's table. "I'll take all the remaining water," I announced, pulling out my wallet. Her eyes widened, a flicker of surprise momentarily breaking through her carefully composed facade. "All of it?" "Yes," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "How much?" As I counted out the money, I could feel the weight of curious stares. Shenho's included. He excused himself from the group and walked towards us. "Why are you buying all the water?" he asked, his voice laced with amusement. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Why should I pay for you?" Yen Zioin's voice was low, almost a whisper, but the underlying steel was unmistakable. "I won't pay," I said, my voice light, betraying none of the turmoil within. I turned to Shenho, a carefully practiced smile gracing my lips. "I'm thirsty." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're strange." "Perhaps," I agreed, my gaze lingering on him for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Just then, another girl, Ju, approached Shenho, a book clutched in her hands. "I thought you might like this," she said shyly, offering it to him. He accepted the book with a polite smile. "Thank you, Ju." He glanced at the title. "This looks interesting." My smile faltered, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Another contender. Another obstacle. "Shenho bought water for you," I said to Yen Zioin, gesturing towards the bottles I just purchased. "Come get it." She hesitated, her eyes darting between me and Shenho. The air crackled with unspoken tensions. Finally, she nodded curtly and followed me. As we walked away, I could feel Shenho's gaze on our backs. I wanted to turn, to see his expression, to decipher the thoughts behind his eyes. But I resisted the urge. Patience, I reminded myself. Patience is key. Later that day, news of Yen Zioin's upcoming job interview at Cindy Shin's prestigious company spread like wildfire. Chunkian, ever the informant, filled me in on the details. Apparently, Miss Shin is known for her unorthodox interview methods, she whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. They say she enjoys putting people on the spot, testing their limits. I thought of Yen Zioen's steely gaze, the quiet determination that radiated from her. I couldn't help but admire her ambition, her willingness to navigate the treacherous waters of the corporate world. And yet, a part of me, a selfish, possessive part, hoped she would fail. Because her success, I knew, would only increase her allure in Shenho's eyes. The scene shifted abruptly. Yen Zioen stood before Miss Shin's imposing desk, the air thick with unspoken power dynamics. Mr. Chang, Shenho's father, was also present, his presence adding another layer of complexity to the already charged atmosphere. He observed Yen Zioen with a calculating gaze, his expression unreadable. Miss Shin, a woman of formidable presence, launched into a series of pointed questions, probing Yen Zioen's past, her motivations, her ambitions. The questions veered unexpectedly towards a sensitive topic, an academic indiscretion from Yen Zioen's past. The room crackled with tension. Yen Zioen's face paled, but her voice remained steady, her responses measured and carefully worded. She navigated the treacherous terrain with surprising skill, deflecting the most damaging blows, turning potential weaknesses into strengths. Mr. Chang's expression remained impassive, but I could sense a flicker of approval in his eyes. He valued resilience, I knew. He valued the ability to thrive under pressure. As the interview progressed, the conversation drifted towards business matters, negotiations with Mr. Luo and Mr. Deng, figures I knew to be powerful players in their respective industries. Yen Zioen listened intently, absorbing the intricate details, her mind working furiously. She offered insightful observations, demonstrating a keen understanding of the complex dynamics at play. Mr. Chang's approval became more pronounced, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. I watched, unseen, my mind racing. The stakes were higher than I'd initially realized. This wasn't just about a job. It was about power, influence, and the intricate web of connections that bound these individuals together. And at the center of it all was Shenho, the unwitting prize in a game he didn't even know he was playing. My heart ached with a mixture of longing and resentment. What chance did I have against such formidable opponents? The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the university quad, painting the worn brick pathways in hues of ochre and gold. I watched as a group of students, their laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air, walked past, their faces animated with the carefree spirit of youth. My gaze lingered on Shenho, his easy smile directed at the girl beside him. Yen Zioen. A pang of something tight and uncomfortable coiled in my chest. Chunkian, ever perceptive, nudged my elbow. Still brooding? He asked, his voice a low rumble. He followed my line of sight, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. She's certainly persistent, isn't she? I shrugged, pretending indifference, though my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Persistent is one word for it, I mumbled, picking at a loose thread on my sleeve. Internally, I seethed. Persistent, strategic, calculating. Yen Zioen wasn't just interested in Shenho, she was actively pursuing him, weaving a delicate web of calculated charm and subtle advances. I knew, with a certainty that bordered on obsession, that every gesture, every glance, every seemingly innocent touch was carefully orchestrated. Let's say if Shenho starts a relationship, Chunkian mused, his eyes fixed on a distant point, seemingly lost in thought, how many girls will break their hearts? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. I knew what he was doing, prodding at my own hidden feelings. He knew, as only a close friend could, the depth of my unspoken affection for Shenho. The thought of him with someone else, anyone else, sent a wave of cold dread through me. More than a few, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. The image of Shenhe smiling at Yan Xiaoan flashed before my eyes, intensifying the bitter taste in my mouth. Chunqian chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. Maybe even you. He turned to me, his eyes glinting with mischief. How about we have a bet? For whether you dare to ask girls out for meals. If you can't, you have to call me father. My breath hitched. The challenge, so casually delivered, landed like a blow to my gut. Ask girls out. The very idea sent a shiver of anxiety down my spine. I was comfortable observing, analyzing, strategizing from the sidelines. Putting myself out there, risking rejection, that was a different story altogether. The blood rushed to my cheeks, a hot flush of embarrassment. What's the matter? Chunqian pressed, his voice laced with mock concern. Cat got your tongue. My mind raced, weighing the options. The humiliation of calling him father versus the terrifying prospect of approaching 3 girls. The choice felt like a no-win situation. But a flicker of something else ignited within me, a spark of defiance. Could I actually do it? Could I break free from the shackles of my own insecurity and take a chance? The uncertainty was both exhilarating and terrifying. 3 girls? I repeated, buying myself time. The image of Yan Xiaoan, effortlessly charming, flitted through my mind again, a stark contrast to my own hesitant nature. In 3 days? 3 girls, 3 days, Chunqian confirmed, his eyes gleaming with amusement. Dinner, nothing fancy. Just a casual invitation. Think you can manage it? I hesitated, my internal monologue a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. What if they laughed? What if they rejected me outright? What if Shenhe found out, and then what? What did I even expect to happen? The rational part of my brain screamed at me to back down, to avoid the potential for humiliation. But something else, a newly awakened sense of determination, pushed me forward. Fine, I said, the word barely escaping my lips. You're on. The moment the words left my mouth, a wave of regret washed over me. What had I just done? Chunqian's grin widened. Excellent. I look forward to calling you son. Later that evening, the scene shifted. The university campus, bathed in the warm glow of late afternoon sun, faded into the sterile, brightly lit environment of a corporate office. Yan Xiaoan sat across from Cindy, or Miss Shin as she was known professionally, a woman whose presence radiated an aura of quiet power. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Yan Xiaoan's carefully constructed composure, the mask she wore so effectively, threatened to crack under Miss Shin's intense scrutiny. So, Miss Yan, Miss Shin began, her voice smooth as polished steel, tell me why you believe you're the right candidate for this position. Yan Xiaoan responded with practiced ease, reciting her qualifications and accomplishments, her voice steady and confident. But beneath the surface, a different narrative unfolded. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the past few days, the subtle maneuvers she had employed to capture Shenhe's attention. The interview, the potential job, felt almost secondary to the intricate game she was playing. Miss Shin listened intently, her expression unreadable. She picked up a document, her fingers tracing the lines of text. I understand there was a discrepancy in your academic record. A plagiarism accusation, if I'm not mistaken. Yan Xiaoan's carefully constructed facade wavered. A flicker of fear, quickly masked, darted across her eyes. Her internal monologue spiraled. How did they know? Had someone deliberately sabotaged her? She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. Yes, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. It was a misunderstanding. A collaborative effort that wasn't properly documented. Miss Shin's gaze intensified. A misunderstanding? Interesting. She leaned back in her chair, the movement almost predatory. Mr. Chang, Shenho's father, has taken a particular interest in your application. He's a valued client, you understand. The mention of Shenho's father sent a jolt of surprise through Yen Zioan. Mr. Chang. What possible connection could he have to her interview? Her mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Had Shenho spoken to his father about her? The thought sent a thrill of excitement through her, mingled with a touch of unease. The conversation shifted to business, the intricate dance of negotiations and contracts. Mr. Luo and Mr. Deng entered the scene, their presence adding another layer of complexity to the already charged atmosphere. The talk of profit margins and market share seemed to fade into the background, a dull hum against the backdrop of Yen Zioan's internal turmoil. She observed the interplay between Miss Shin and the two men, her analytical mind dissecting their every move, every word. She was learning, adapting, calculating the best way to navigate this new and unfamiliar terrain. The job, she realized, was more than just a stepping stone in her career, it was a pawn in a larger game, a game she was determined to win. And Shenho, whether he knew it or not, was the ultimate prize. The lingering scent of sweat and the rhythmic squeak of sneakers against the polished floor hung in the air, a testament to the fierce basketball game that had just ended. The setting sun cast long shadows across the court, painting the scene in hues of orange and purple. My gaze, however, was fixed on Yen Zioan, a solitary figure standing near the bleachers, seemingly detached from the boisterous celebrations of the winning team. She held a water bottle, its condensation glistening in the fading light, her eyes distant, as though her mind was miles away. Chunkian's words echoed in my ears, Yaoan. Ask her for a meal. Go ahead. The bet we'd made earlier felt like a lead weight in my stomach. It wasn't the trivial sum of money, it was the implied challenge to my carefully constructed composure. I, who prided myself on observing and analyzing human behavior, now felt like a clumsy actor on a poorly lit stage. I want to treat you to a meal, I heard myself say, the words sounding strangely hollow even to my own ears. My internal monologue was a chaotic mess. Was this the right approach? Too direct? Too abrupt? Perhaps a more subtle, intellectual conversation starter would have been better. But that damned bet had forced my hand. Yen Zioan turned, her expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, our eyes met, and a strange sensation, a mixture of anticipation and dread, washed over me. Her silence stretched, each second feeling like an eternity. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, calculating, assessing. Are you betting? She finally asked, her voice soft yet laced with a hint of amusement. The question caught me off guard. Had she overheard the earlier conversation with Chunkian? Or was it simply an astute observation, a testament to her perceptiveness? My mind raced, searching for a plausible response. Betting? I feigned ignorance, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. No, of course not. Just thought you might be hungry after watching the game. The lie felt heavy on my tongue, a bitter taste in my mouth. A flicker of something, perhaps disappointment, crossed her face. Thank you, she replied, her voice polite yet distant. But I have other plans. She turned away then, her figure receding into the growing darkness, leaving me standing there, feeling foolish and exposed. The walk back to the dormitory felt longer than usual, the weight of my failure pressing down on me. Chunkian's smug grin only added to my frustration. Had I misread the situation entirely? Was my analysis of Yen Zioan's behavior flawed? Later that evening, I found myself pacing my room, replaying the encounter in my mind. The subtle shift in her expression, the almost imperceptible hesitation in her voice, there was something there, a flicker of interest perhaps, buried beneath layers of reserve. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something crucial, a hidden clue in the complex puzzle that was Yen Zioan. An image flashed in my mind, Yen Zioan's meticulously organized notes, the way she always arrived early for lectures, the subtle yet determined glint in her eyes when she spoke about her career aspirations. Ambition. That was the key. She wasn't just a student, she was a strategist, a planner, someone who meticulously calculated every move. Driven by a renewed sense of purpose, I left the dormitory, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the suffocating confines of my room. I knew where I would find her. The library, her sanctuary, her battlefield of intellect. The library was almost deserted at this hour, the silence broken only by the soft rustle of turning pages and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards. I found her seated at a corner table, surrounded by stacks of books and papers, her brow furrowed in concentration. This time, I wouldn't rely on impulsive gestures or clumsy attempts at casual conversation. I would appeal to her ambition, her strategic mind. I approached her table, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yawen," I began, my voice steady and calm, "I overheard you talking to Professor Lee earlier about the internship at Chang Enterprises. I happen to know someone who works there." Her head snapped up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Really?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of eagerness. This was it, the opening I had been waiting for. "Yes," I continued, "my uncle is a senior manager there. He mentioned they were looking for someone with a specific skill set, someone with a strong background in." I paused, deliberately leaving the sentence unfinished, dangling the bait. She leaned forward, her interest piqued. "And?" "Data analysis and financial modeling," I finished, my eyes meeting hers. "I know you've excelled in those areas. I could put in a good word for you, if you'd like." A slow smile spread across her face, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "That would be amazing," she breathed, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you." "Dinner?" I asked, the words slipping out almost effortlessly. "My treat. We can discuss the details." This time, there was no hesitation. "I'd like that," she replied, her eyes sparkling with a newfound warmth. The victory, though small, felt intoxicating. I had finally deciphered the code, unlocked the puzzle that was Yen Zioan. But in the quiet corners of my mind, a nagging doubt persisted. Was this genuine interest, or simply a strategic move on her part? The answer, I knew, lay hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed in the intricate dance of ambition and desire. The Doha Capital Office hummed with the low thrum of ambition. Sunlight, refracted through the towering glass facade, glinted off the polished surfaces, reflecting the sharp angles of Yen Zioan's jaw. She sat rigidly, her hands clasped in her lap, the pristine leather of the chair cool against her skin. The interview panel, three figures blurred by nerves and the stark backlighting, seemed to scrutinize her with an almost predatory intensity. A single bead of sweat traced a path down her temple. She could feel the weight of their gazes, each a silent question mark pressing against her carefully constructed composure. "Don't falter," she told herself, the words a mantra against the rising tide of anxiety. "This is everything. According to your resume, you graduated from the finance department at BGI, right?" The voice, belonging to the central figure, a woman with eyes that seemed to pierce through facades, sliced through the silence. Yen Zioan swallowed, the dryness in her throat momentarily choking her. "Yes, ma'am." The words felt thin, inadequate against the weight of the moment. Inside, a whirlwind of doubt raged. Should I have omitted it? Pretended it never happened? But the thought felt like a betrayal, a crack in the carefully crafted image she'd presented. "Impressive GPA," another voice chimed in, a man with a carefully trimmed mustache and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Straight A's, if I'm not mistaken." Yen Zioan nodded, the movement tight and controlled. The praise felt hollow, a prelude to the inevitable fall. They know, she thought, a cold dread creeping into her veins. They must know. The woman in the center leaned forward, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "You got A+ in every class, but why don't you have a bachelor's degree?" The air in the room thickened, the unspoken hanging heavy between them. Yen Zioen's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The moment of truth. Every carefully constructed defense crumbled in the face of that direct, unflinching question. For a fleeting moment, she considered lying, weaving a tale of illness or family emergency. Anything to escape the shame, the judgment. But the words wouldn't come. A strange sense of defiance, a flicker of something akin to pride, sparked within her. She began, her voice barely above a whisper, "back in school, I helped a classmate cheat on an exam." The confession hung in the air, a fragile thing exposed to the elements. Yen Zioen closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable wave of disapproval. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall, each tick a hammer blow against her fragile hope. When she finally opened her eyes, the woman in the center was regarding her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't the outright condemnation she'd expected, nor was it approval. It was something else entirely, something that sent a shiver of unease down her spine. "Thank you for your honesty, Miss Yen," the woman said, her voice smooth and controlled. "We'll be in touch." The dismissal was abrupt, leaving Yen Zioen feeling disoriented and adrift. As she walked out of the towering glass building and into the bustling city streets, the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her. The interview had felt like a dissection, her deepest flaws laid bare under the harsh fluorescent lights. "It's over," she thought, the words a bitter taste in her mouth. "I've ruined everything." Later that day, the news reached me, filtered through the tangled web of university gossip. Chuntian, ever the vigilant observer, relayed the information with a mixture of disbelief and morbid fascination. "Can you believe it?" she whispered, leaning closer, her voice a conspiratorial murmur. "Yen Zioen actually got the job." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process the information. "But the cheating incident," Chuntian shrugged, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of amusement and something else, something I couldn't quite place. Apparently, Miss Shin was impressed by her honesty. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. I thought back to Yen Zioen, her quiet confidence, the way she carried herself with an almost regal air. Was it truly honesty that had landed her the job? Or was there something else at play, some hidden current beneath the surface of events? That evening, I found myself walking past Shenho's usual hangout spot, a quiet cafe tucked away in a corner of the campus. Through the large window, I saw him sitting with his father, Mr. Chang, a man whose name resonated with power and influence. Their conversation was animated, their gestures sharp and precise. I watched them for a long moment, a strange premonition creeping into my heart. There was a connection here, a thread linking Yen Zioen's improbable success to the man sitting across from Shenho. A thread I couldn't quite grasp, but one that felt charged with a potent, unsettling energy. The pieces of the puzzle swirled in my mind, refusing to coalesce into a coherent picture. Yen Zioen, Shenho, Mr. Chang, Miss Shin, their lives intertwined in a complex dance of ambition, influence, and unspoken desires. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to understand, to unravel the mystery that lay beneath the surface of their carefully constructed lives. What game are they playing? I wondered, the question echoing in the silent chambers of my mind. And more importantly, what role do I play in this intricate, unspoken drama? The answer, I knew, lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. And I was determined to find it, no matter the cost. The rhythmic clatter of keyboard strokes filled the air, punctuated by the low hum of the air conditioning. Yen Zioen's fingers danced across the keys, a blur of efficient motion. I watched her from my usual vantage point, the corner table near the large window overlooking the bustling city street below. Her focus was absolute, brows slightly furrowed in concentration as she navigated through complex spreadsheets. How could someone so dedicated to work also be so captivating? The question gnawed at me, a persistent echo in the quiet chambers of my mind. Was it ambition that drove her, or something more? Something like Shenhe? She paused, her slender fingers hovering over the enter key, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Hesitation. Doubt. I leaned forward, my breath catching in my throat. Was this the crack in her carefully constructed facade? The glimpse into the woman beneath the composed exterior? The answer, when it came, was both surprising and disappointing. A soft sigh escaped her lips, and she reached for her phone, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. She was texting. Texting Shenhe, I presumed. A dull ache settled in my chest. The fleeting hope I'd harbored, the possibility of a connection, seemed to dissipate like smoke in the wind. Later, in a quiet cafe, the steam from my cup of jasmine tea curled around my face, a fragrant veil against the world. Yen Xiaoyan stirred her coffee, her gaze fixed on the swirling liquid. We'd been discussing her upcoming presentation, a crucial step in her bid to secure the coveted position. Miss Shin is formidable, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, recalling my own brief encounter with the woman. Cindy Shin exuded an aura of power, a quiet confidence that bordered on intimidation. She sees through everything, Yen Xiaoyan continued, a shiver tracing its spine down my back. Every pretense, every carefully constructed lie. My mind raced. Was she referring to her own carefully constructed image? The image of the ambitious, driven professional, untouched by the vulnerabilities of love? Or was it something deeper, something more sinister? You seem to know her well, I ventured, my voice betraying none of the turmoil within. Only through observation, she replied, her eyes meeting mine for a fleeting moment. Just as you observe me. Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I felt a blush creep up my neck, a wave of heat flooding my face. Had she seen through my charade? My carefully crafted pretense of friendship? The thought both thrilled and terrified me. Days melted into weeks, each interaction with Yen Xiaoyan a carefully orchestrated dance. I offered my assistance with her work, a seemingly innocuous gesture that allowed me to spend more time in her presence. I listened intently as she spoke, absorbing every detail, every nuance of her voice. Each shared glance, each fleeting touch, fueled the fire within me, a burning desire that I knew I shouldn't, express. Yet, the more I learned about her, the more I understood her ambition, her vulnerabilities, the more I felt drawn to her, like a moth to a flickering flame. One evening, I found myself at a social gathering hosted by Shenhe's parents. Mr. Chang, a man of immense wealth and influence, held court, his booming laughter filling the opulent room. He spoke of Shenhe's future, his plans for the family business, his voice laced with a mixture of pride and possessiveness. I watched as Yen Xiaoyan navigated the room, her movements graceful and composed, her smile carefully calibrated. She engaged in polite conversation with Mr. Chang, her eyes never straying far from Shenhe, who stood across the room, engaged in a conversation with a group of his friends. The air crackled with unspoken tensions, the intricate web of relationships stretched taut. I saw the subtle glances exchanged between Mr. Chang and Yen Xiaoyan, the unspoken understanding that passed between them. It was clear that Mr. Chang was assessing her, weighing her suitability, not just as a potential employee, but as a potential partner for his son. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that my own silent pursuit of Yen Xiaoyan was a fool's errand. The game was rigged, the outcome predetermined. Later, as I stood on the balcony, the cool night air against my face, I saw Yen Xiaoyan step outside. She leaned against the railing, her gaze fixed on the city lights below. I approached her hesitantly, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's a beautiful view," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned to me, her eyes reflecting the city lights, a flicker of something sadness. "Resignation." "It is," she replied, her voice soft, almost melancholic. "But sometimes, the most beautiful things are also the most unattainable." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I knew she wasn't just talking about the view. She was talking about Shenhe. About her ambitions. About the carefully constructed life she was building for herself, a life that, it seemed, I would never be a part of. A wave of despair washed over me, a bitter realization that the game was over before it had even begun. And yet, in that moment of defeat, I also felt a strange sense of liberation. The truth, however painful, had finally set me free. The ensuing weeks witnessed a subtle shift in our dynamic. I no longer pursued Yan Xiaoan with the same fervor. My observations, once fueled by a desperate hope, now took on a detached, almost clinical quality. I watched as she navigated the complexities of her new job, her interactions with Miss Xin, her carefully orchestrated encounters with Shenhe. I saw the cracks in her facade widen, the strain of maintaining her carefully constructed persona beginning to show. And I realized, with a strange sense of clarity, that she wasn't the only one playing a game. We were all players in a complex, intricate dance, each with our own hidden motives, our own unspoken desires. And in this game of hearts and ambitions, there were no winners, only casualties. The air in the room, thick with unspoken tension, hung heavy like a shroud. Sunlight, filtering through the sheer curtains, cast long, ethereal shadows that seemed to dance with the dust motes. I imagined Yan Xiaoan, standing in the opulent living room, the expensive Persian rug beneath her feet a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside her. Shenhe's mother, a woman I'd only ever seen from afar, radiating an aura of composed elegance, sat opposite her, a delicate porcelain teacup cradled in her manicured hands. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the quiet clinking of the spoon against the fine china. It was a scene I could only piece together, a puzzle formed from whispers and hushed conversations, but the weight of it pressed on me, a dull ache in my chest. I pictured Yan Xiaoan's face, normally a mask of cool indifference, now perhaps betraying a flicker of uncertainty. Her thoughts, usually so meticulously guarded, must have been a whirlwind. Did she regret her pursuit of Shenhe? Did the sheer force of his family's disapproval make her question her own desires? I knew ambition burned within her, a quiet, steady flame, but love, I suspected, was a different beast altogether. Shenhe's mother, her voice soft yet firm, broke the silence. "If you truly love someone, you'll put yourself in their shoes." Each word, carefully chosen, landed with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. My own heart clenched at the familiar ache of unrequited affection, the bitter tang of understanding. To love someone was to see their world, their vulnerabilities, and to want to protect them, even from oneself. Yan Xiaoan's reply, I imagined, was equally measured, each word a testament to her resolve. I could almost hear her voice, steady and unwavering, refusing to yield. This strength, this unwavering determination, was what drew Shenhe to her, I realized with a pang of envy. I, with my careful calculations and strategic maneuvering, could never possess such raw, untamed spirit. Shenhe's mother continued, her voice laced with a weariness that spoke of battles fought and scars borne. "If you don't give up on Shenhe and break up with him, his father will remove him from the company." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I could almost see the subtle shift in Yan Xiaoan's posture, the barely perceptible tightening of her jaw, a sign of the internal struggle raging within her. This wasn't just about love, it was about power, about the complex interplay of family, ambition, and sacrifice. "Everything I do is for his good," Shenhe's mother added, her voice tinged with a hint of desperation. It was a plea disguised as a statement, a mother's fierce protectiveness laid bare. I wondered if Yen Xiaowen saw it, if she understood the depth of the love that fueled this seemingly cruel ultimatum. My own thoughts spiraled. Was Shenhe's mother right? Was this love, this fierce, unwavering connection, truly detrimental to Shenhe's future? Could Yen Xiaowen, with her sharp intellect and unwavering ambition, possibly navigate the treacherous currents of his family's expectations? I doubted it. The world of business, I knew, was a ruthless game, one where emotions were liabilities and strategic alliances were everything. A new image flashed through my mind, a memory of Yen Xiaowen in the sterile, modern office, facing Cindy, Miss Shin, her potential employer. The air in that room had been charged with a different kind of tension, a silent battle of wits between two formidable women. Cindy, her gaze sharp and penetrating, had dissected Yen Xiaowen's past, her academic indiscretion laid bare like a specimen under a microscope. I never imagined one decision of mine could be worth so much money, Yen Xiaowen had murmured, her voice barely audible, yet filled with a self-deprecating humor that masked a deeper vulnerability. It was a moment of raw honesty, a glimpse behind the carefully constructed facade. Even Cindy, I recalled, had seemed momentarily taken aback, her expression softening just a fraction. The memory of that exchange now took on a new significance. Yen Xiaowen, despite her ambition, was not immune to the consequences of her actions. She understood the weight of choices, the ripple effect they had on one's life. And now, faced with another difficult decision, another potential sacrifice, how would she react? Shenhe's mother's final words echoed in my mind, a poignant plea laced with resignation. If you really love my son, I think you should let him go. The words hung in the air, a silent testament to the complexities of love and sacrifice. It was a cruel paradox, a twisted logic that demanded the surrender of love in the name of love itself. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine Yen Xiaowen's reaction. Would she crumble under the weight of this emotional onslaught? Would she succumb to the pressure and relinquish her claim on Shenhe's heart? Or would she fight, clinging to her love with the same fierce determination she had shown in the face of professional scrutiny? The silence that followed, I knew, was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of contemplation, of a mind grappling with a decision that would alter the course of several lives. And in that silence, I felt a strange sense of anticipation, a morbid curiosity about the path Yen Xiaowen would ultimately choose. My own feelings for Shenhe, a quiet, persistent ache, paled in comparison to the drama unfolding before me, a drama I could only observe from the sidelines, a silent spectator to the intricate dance of love, ambition, and sacrifice. The muted hum of the air conditioning was the soundtrack to Yen Xiaowen's new reality. Her office, small but impeccably organized, felt both a victory and a cage. The sleek lines of the desk, the cool glass of the skyscraper windows, these were the trappings of success, the very things she'd coveted for so long. Yet, a restless energy thrummed beneath her skin, a subtle dissonance between the polished exterior and the turbulent currents within. She tapped a pen against her notepad, the rhythmic clicks echoing the insistent beat of her own ambition. Had it been worth it? The calculated risks, the carefully constructed facade, the sacrifice of honesty? The image of Shenhe's gentle smile flickered in her mind, a fleeting warmth against the cool steel of her ambition. The intercom buzzed, Miss Shin's crisp voice slicing through the quiet. Xiaowen, Mr. Luo and Mr. Deng are here. A knot tightened in her stomach. This was it. The culmination of weeks of preparation, the final test. She smoothed down her skirt, a gesture both practical and symbolic, an attempt to quell the tremor in her hand. Coming, Miss Shin. Her voice was even, betraying none of the internal struggle. She had learned well. The meeting room was a stark contrast to her own space, a vast expanse of polished wood and panoramic city views. Luo and Deng, seasoned sharks in tailored suits, radiated an aura of power and expectation. Cindy, her posture ramrod straight, exuded a quiet confidence that was more intimidating than any overt display of authority. Xiaowen took her place, her mind racing through the intricacies of the proposal, calculating the potential pitfalls, anticipating their every question. She had studied, she had prepared, she had strategized. Now, she would perform. Hours later, the tension finally broke. Luo, a hint of grudging admiration in his eyes, extended his hand. "Impressive, Miss Yen. Very impressive." Deng echoed the sentiment, a subtle nod of approval. Xiaowen allowed herself a small, controlled smile, a carefully calibrated expression of professional satisfaction. The relief, when it came, was a tidal wave, threatening to wash away the carefully constructed composure she'd maintained throughout the ordeal. Later, Cindy's praise was succinct, but weighted with meaning. "You handled that well, Xiaowen. I knew you could." There was a flicker of something akin to warmth in her eyes, a subtle acknowledgement of the shared understanding that existed between them, a bond forged in the crucible of ambition and calculated risk. The evening air felt cool against Xiaowen's skin as she walked towards the familiar glow of Shenhe's family home. The elaborate gates, the meticulously manicured lawns, the imposing facade, they were symbols of a world she had always aspired to, a world she now felt closer to than ever before. Shenhe greeted her with his usual warmth, a genuine smile that eased the persistent tension in her shoulders. He was oblivious, she realized, to the complex web of machinations that had brought her here, to the calculated steps she had taken to secure her place in his world. He saw only Xiaowen, the friend, the classmate, the girl he'd always known. A pang of guilt, sharp and unexpected, pierced the carefully constructed armor around her heart. Inside, Mr. Chang dominated the conversation, his voice booming with authority as he discussed business deals and political maneuvering. Shenhe listened patiently, his expression a mixture of respect and subtle weariness. Xiaowen watched them, her mind racing. Chang's influence was undeniable, a force that shaped Shenhe's life in ways he couldn't even comprehend. She understood that now, understood the unspoken rules, the invisible strings that bound them. She had learned to navigate these currents, to play the game, to secure her place. Later, as Shenhe walked her to the gate, the silence between them felt charged with unspoken emotions. He spoke about his father, his voice laced with a mixture of admiration and resentment. "He wants what's best for me," he said, a hint of defiance in his tone, "but sometimes I wonder if he even sees me." Xiaowen's heart ached for him, for the gilded cage he inhabited, for the weight of expectations he carried. She wanted to tell him the truth, to confess the lengths she'd gone to, the risks she'd taken, all for the chance to be closer to him. But the words caught in her throat, trapped behind the carefully constructed facade she had so meticulously crafted. The memory of Chunkian's words echoed in her mind, a cynical observation about the nature of ambition and the price of success. Sometimes, Chunkian had said, her voice laced with a knowing sadness, we become the very things we despise. Xiaowen shivered, a sudden chill in the warm night air. Had she become that? A calculating strategist, a manipulator, a player in a game she hadn't even realized she'd joined? The image of the narrator, their quiet observation, their unspoken longing, flashed in her mind. A pang of something akin to regret, a subtle ache of empathy, resonated within her. She had won, hadn't she? Secured her position, gained access to the world she craved. Yet, the victory felt hollow, tainted by the knowledge of the compromises she'd made, the truths she'd concealed. As she stepped out into the night, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of color, she wondered if the price of her ambition was worth the emptiness that now echoed in her soul. The game was over, she had won. But what, she wondered, had she truly gained? And what, she feared, had she irrevocably lost?